Remember the good old days, back when the Nintendo Switch was just a wee tot, or maybe still not out yet, I don't really remember, and we kept hearing about GameCube Virtual Console? Yeah, me neither. For a while it seemed inevitable that we'd be getting GameCube games on the Switch. First it seemed like Nintendo would release them through the Virtual Console, that never happened and the Virtual Console died. Then it seemed like we might be getting more remasters like we did with the Wii U and even 3DS, that hasn't happened so far either. The GameCube is one of, if not the, most beloved Nintendo consoles, and it has some of the best Nintendo games ever made. But right now, it doesn't feel like GameCube games are anywhere close to happening. And that's dumb, because I really cronkin' want some GameCube games. And really, if you think about it, it doesn't even make sense that we aren't getting GameCube games. Don't give me any of that analog trigger nonsense, these games could totally show up on the Switch. And Nintendo would rake in tons of that sweet dough without all that much effort. So why haven't we gotten GameCube games yet? And will we ever get them? I have some honest speculation and also a pretty far-fetched conspiracy theory, so hopefully somewhere in here I'm able to figure out what's going on somewhat. But that's probably wishful thinking, because I'm a hunk of trash. Hello all 1,844 of you, I'm Redkwan, and will we get GameCube games on the Switch? So let me first explain why the current situation doesn't make a ton of sense. So we have all these GameCube games, which people absolutely love, but they're hard for most people to get a hold of because they're only available on the GameCube, and the GameCube didn't sell very well. So there are a ton of these really highly acclaimed games that are pretty expensive and difficult to play. And really, it shouldn't be all that hard for Nintendo to put out some GameCube games and rake in the money. They could remaster them, do full remakes, or even just put them out in a virtual console style. And all of these would make a ton of money. I've also heard some people thinking that adding N64 and GameCube games to the free games with the online service is something that's coming, and while I could see that happening with maybe N64 games, releasing full GameCube games for free, which probably wouldn't get that many more people in on the service, isn't a very smart idea. But assuming they didn't release them for free, which I think is a pretty safe bet, Nintendo could make a killing off GameCube games. But for whatever reason, they haven't released any of them in any form on the Switch. That's why this doesn't make sense. Now there are a few things you could use to justify this with. The one I've heard a lot is that because the GameCube controller was set up differently and had things like analog triggers, which the Switch doesn't, a lot of the games just wouldn't work. And while there might be some truth to that, I think there's probably still some pretty easy workarounds. Nintendo was able to put Twilight Princess and Wind Waker on the Wii U, and the 3DS got Luigi's Mansion. So it's not like there aren't a lot of big games that could work pretty easily. And even if they were a little harder, I'm sure the Switch has enough button and motion capabilities to make pretty much everything work. It might take a little doing, but there's no way they couldn't do it pretty darn easily in comparison to how much money they'd make off of it. You could also make the case that Nintendo just doesn't want to release too many old games right now. The Switch already does have a bit of a reputation of being a port console, and Nintendo might not want to further that if they don't have to. And that could be part of it, but there are ways around this too. It'd be pretty easy to release them in some form of a virtual console. I know Nintendo killed off the Virtual Console for Switch Online, but I really don't see them as incompatible. If Nintendo released some GameCube games for download on the Switch, they could still make a ton of money off of it, and people could still play their free NES games. The only thing I think there might be some truth to is that there's a combination of both reasons. That Nintendo might not be putting out GameCube games for download because at some point in the future they would like to do full-blown remasters, and putting them out now would make those much less useful. But they don't think now is the right time for ports, because ports would further the Switch's reputation as a port machine. I still don't exactly buy that reasoning, but there doesn't seem like much else that could explain it. Sure, the Wii and Wii U didn't have GameCube games, but the Wii had GameCube backwards compatibility, and the Wii U got a few remasters, and might have gotten more if it was doing better and could easily run GameCube games through the Virtual Console. The fact that the Switch doesn't have anything doesn't make much sense. The Switch is doing fantastically well, and there's a bigger demand for GameCube games than there's ever been before, or at least since, like, the GameCube. The Switch is clearly powerful enough to handle GameCube games in whatever form Nintendo feels like doing, and there isn't much of a reason not to, especially with the huge upside. I think that the only thing that makes sense is that Nintendo is consciously not putting GameCube games on the Switch right now. And that could either be because they have a plan for them, or they're not putting them out to protect something. So first, I think the most likely thing is that Nintendo does have some plan for GameCube games. With the huge demand and relative ease of being able to put out these old games on the Switch, it wouldn't make sense not to do something. A virtual console style download seems possible, but if that was their plan, they probably would have done something by now. I think it's probably more likely they'll remaster some games from the GameCube and release them later in the Switch's life, because that way they can make the whole $60 from them, and it allows them to make each game feel like a bigger deal. It still is a little weird that they wouldn't have done anything yet, but maybe Nintendo didn't want to mix them up with Wii U ports because they really are a different sort of experience. Now that Wii U ports have stopped coming though, GameCube remasters might start coming fairly soon. Not a lot of them, but some. That's my honest guess from what I've seen. There's so much demand for these games, and it shouldn't be too hard to move most of them over. So I think it makes a lot of sense to treat these like Wii U ports now that the Wii U ports are drying up. And we'll probably see a few GameCube remasters before the Switch is done. Or even Wii U ports of GameCube remasters. Chew on that one. But if we want to throw rational explanations aside, which I think we should do for some reason, maybe there's something sinister going on behind the scenes. What if Nintendo is protecting something? What if the GameCube was too good, and putting out GameCube games would be devastating to our mindsets that newer is better? What if people started selling their Switches and getting GameCubes? But if everybody only wanted GameCubes and nobody wanted Switches, would the change in the video game marketplace be so radical that we would crash the world economy? What if this is the only way to prevent the complete collapse of civilization as we know it? What if by not releasing GameCube games on the Switch, Nintendo's preventing the destruction of humanity? Realistically though, they probably just want to make a lot of money off them and time their releases appropriately, but who can say for sure? Well, I'm Redkwan. Do you think we're going to be getting GameCube games on the Switch? If so, when and in what form will they come? I don't know what that last segment was, but it's a pretty safe bet that it was awful, so I'm sorry you had to sit through that. I don't know what else to say for this part. I hope you all have a great National Surgical Oncologist Day. It's coming up. Anyways, I'm Redkwan. Thank you all for watching, and I'll hopefully see you all later. Goodbye.